So let's go to Psalm 127 if you want. And just read one verse and then dive into some thoughts on healthy parenting. So Psalm 127 and verse 3, it says, sons are indeed a heritage from the Lord and offspring a reward. The idea there, of course, from the Lord, that children are something, they're a gift from God. And sometimes it doesn't feel like they're a gift from God, but they are. And so we're going to take just a couple minutes and talk through the idea of what it means to be a healthy parent. We'll look at kind of goals in parenting and barriers to healthy parenting. And so I think it'll be something that'll help us. So let's pray and we'll dive in. Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to look into your word. Lord, I pray that as we make our way through the passage, through these thoughts, Lord, that you help us. I pray that you would encourage our mind and heart today. Your direction, know exactly what you say about leading our families. We love you and we thank you for your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Of course, last night in the session, built the foundation. The message is called "The Foundation Matters." So the idea is that we have to build our life on the foundation of God's love, building our family on that. And today, just really want to think about what it means to be a healthy parent. If you were to define healthy parenting in our culture, it would look different to everybody. Some people would say, well, healthy parenting for me is time with kids. Healthy parenting for me is making sure that my kids are physically healthy, and if they're physically healthy, then everything's good. But the truth is there's not a cookie cutter program that gives us healthy parenting. But there are biblical principles that help us understand what healthy parenting is. So I'm going to talk just for a minute about the goals of a parent and kind of thinking about the goals of a parent and healthy parenting. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 7, it says, listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one Lord. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. So in that verse, there's two great goals about parenting. Annie's going to give us first.
So I think that the first and absolute primary goal of parenting should be to help our kids love God with all their hearts. I don't know about you guys, our kids being 19, 18, 16, age range, they know what we love. And they know that we love coffee. They know we love going on trips. They know we love, I love talking about health. They know all the things that we get excited about. But I think it's really, really important that our kids know we love Jesus. And sometimes it's all in theory in our minds, but this was a convicting thought to me as we were getting ready to teach this is what I say and do every single day, showing my kids that I love Jesus, that loving God is my number one thing, or do all the other things that I love speak more loudly than that? So number one, absolute parenting goal should be letting our kids know that we love God, because they will follow suit. If we love other things more than God in our lives, then they will allow other things in their lives to take preeminence over God. And this is not the idea of, we'll get into this later, but it's not the idea of behavior modification. Act like you love Jesus. I don't know what, depending on the examples you saw growing up, many times you can kind of have that in you without even realizing it. That you're like, straighten up because we love God in this family. But to authentically love him and to teach your kids to authentically love him. And then another thing is that we should teach our kids not to be afraid of God. And that is when a person really and truly has a heart for God and knows him, it's a lot less likely for them to walk away from God. A lot of parents are afraid that their kids are going to walk away from God. They kind of go through parenting, all the stages of parenting, with this fear of, am I going to ruin my kid and they're going to walk away from God? But if we authentically love God and teach our kids to love him and know him, it's a lot less likely that they will walk away from him. Of course, the old classic, Proverbs 22:6, start a youth out on his way, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Of course, being a wisdom principle, not a promise from God directly to start a kid on the way, they will not depart. It's a wisdom concept, but it is teaching us the truth that by and large, when people are set in the right way, not the behavior needs to change way, but the way of we really love God and his family, it is a lot less likely that in the end of their days, they will turn their backs on God. So just teaching our kids to really know him, to know who he is. I really think that with any human relationship, any two people can grow to love each other. You can, and I mean, you think about the person that annoys you the most in the world. It is, if you spend a lot of time with people, you grow to love them. Even people that frustrate you, that drive you crazy. It just is the nature of relationships is that as we know each other well, we see each other's pain and joys and we grow to love each other. It's the same thing with God, is that when we teach our kids to really know him, to know who he is, to know his character, that they will grow to love him in their own way and have their own relationship with him. So teaching our kids to know him, to know about him, to have authenticity and care about him. And then I think about the verse in John 10:27 that says, my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. And we really want our kids to be able to hear God's voice for themselves, not just to hear it through mom and dad. It does start out that way, but I think about my dad, and my parents raised sheep, and they have all these sheep on their farm, about 40 sheep. And there was one night where a bunch of my dad's sheep escaped, and they went across the highway that's just above their house. So
where we have an HDMI cable anywhere. Sound sharper.
Should I keep going? Yeah. Okay. So my dad has all these sheep, and in the middle of the night, about 40 of his sheep escaped and went up across the highway from their house, and they actually stopped right in the middle of the highway. And so there was cars trying to get through, and my dad's 40 sheep were all blocking the highway. And so it was about 2 a.m. and my dad gets a call from the sheriff of their town they live in. And he says, hey, all your sheep are out. They're blocking the highway. There's cars can't get through. He's like, my guys are out there. We're trying to move the sheep. We cannot get them to budge. So my dad comes out there. And so every day when my dad would go to feed his sheep, he had a sheep call that he would use to them to come. And his sheep call is, hey, you. He would go, hey, you. And all the sheep would come running because they knew that was food time. So my dad goes out there and he looks up there, and there's the whole, like all the guys from the sheriff's department are trying to get these sheep. Come on, sheep, come on, sheep. They're pushing them. And the sheep, if you've ever been around sheep, they will not budge. They will not move. And so my dad doesn't even leave his front porch. He doesn't even put on shoes. He just steps out onto his front porch and goes, hey, you! And then sure enough, all of the sheep just come walking. And the sheriff guys are just standing there like, why couldn't we move them? And it's just, I just love that story because his sheep moved because they know his voice. And they heard his voice and they respond. And I love it whenever I hear this voice, or this verse about my sheep hear my voice. It's just such a perfect idea that when our kids see us authentically loving Jesus, and when they get to know him and know who he is, they learn to have that familiarity with the voice of God.
Yeah, so to set a biblical to have a good goal of parenting, the first part is helping our kids have a heart for the Lord. The second goal is to set a biblical framework for life. So the verses that are listed there, the first part says, I want you to love the Lord with all your heart. The second part says, I want you to teach your kids to do that. Verse 6 and 7. These words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them. And I want you to see what it says talk about. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. The idea is basically every waking hour, you should be pointing toward the Lord, pointing toward Him. The idea of a biblical framework is helping our kids desire to make decisions based upon God's word. Now, they're going to have other influences. We all do, right? We make decisions based upon work, and we make decisions based upon schedule and other people and family and all that type of stuff. But a biblical framework says, I want to make life's decisions first based off God's word. It's building our life completely on the Lord, not a biblical framework, or not a framework of a church or a pastor or a school teacher or a counselor. Those things are good influences, but my framework should be built upon the word of God. And the goal is to shape them and direct them so that their heart is continually drawn toward the Lord. So when you talk about the goals of parenting, I think we really could say there's a lot of goals. Like Hannah said it a second ago, you want your kids to be raised right and to grow up right. But sometimes we have this mindset of, well, I've only got them for the short little time, so I can't mess up, But when we play the short game, we often fail. So playing the long game is what matters. The long game is I want to build their heart toward the Lord now, and I want to help them have a biblical framework now. And then knowing the goals of parenting, that brings us to this thought of what stops us from doing that. What stops us from being healthy parents? There's some barriers to it, and I think it's good for us to know the barriers, because if we know the barriers, then we can address them and we can really attack the goals when we get through the barriers. So the first barrier, I think, is extremely important, and it's just that we forget that life is brief. We forget that life is brief.
So I think it's so easy to, looking back, he mentioned last night that our years of raising our kids, like we're right on the tail end, just a few short years before our kids are all out of the house, which we've been told. One of the ladies at my church, when our son went to college last year, a lot of people kept coming up to me and going, "Oh, how's your mama heart?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm excited for him, But one lady at our way out the door from church, she's like, "Don't worry, he'll be back." And, they're just entering this young adult phase in life. And it's so fun and exciting, but it really does slap us in the face to realize how quickly it went by. And we do, and especially when your kids are little and you're just so tired all the time and dealing with dragging little kids around, just meeting their needs on a daily basis, you forget that life is short. It doesn't feel short. It feels long. The days are long, right? The years are short, the days are long. And so I think even though in the day-to-day we can forget that life is short, James says that our life is just a vapor that appears for a little while and vanishes away. And in our culture, there's so much to fill up our life. We could talk about this for a long time, but I think that we were not created with the capacity for all the things that American culture throws at us. All the things that even if we don't believe we have to have all these things in our life, our culture around us is like, you've got to be in sports, you've got to do these after-school programs, you've got to do this, this, and this. And as a believer, we just really have to love God with all our hearts, teach our kids to do that. But we just get so much, pressure from the culture to be involved in so many things. And it just takes, our time just slips away so easily. Also, just distractions around us can really eat up our time. So remembering that life is short and that we do only have, today, think about it in simple terms. Think about today. You only get to live today, right now, today. And once today is gone, you don't get this day back. And it really does help put things in perspective to go, okay, today I can impact my kids toward Jesus. I just get this one shot. And the older they get, it's easier to neglect because as your kids get older, they get busier too. They get all these things that they are wanting to do. They get jobs, they get friendships that they want to maintain, and they're busy and you're busy. And so it's really important to just value today and value the short little life that God gave us to impact our kids for eternity. Our busyness can sometimes cause us to waste precious time with our kids. But I think when we stand before the Lord, we're not going to look back and go, oh man, I wish I had done one more program. I wish I had signed my kids up for one more event. I wish I had spent more time on my hobbies and all that. I think we're going to go, okay, what did I pour into my kids that really made them love God more?
The second thing is that often, second barrier is that we fear we don't know enough. I think this is a big one because our fear is something that it holds us back. So I'm going to give you that.
Okay. Yeah. So sometimes we're intimidated, and this is a real thing. We fear that one of the girls in my church, she has 4 kids. And we were talking the other day, and she came from an abusive home, and she's basically untying all these knots in her mind of how home should work. And so she's really trying to guide her kids into healthy thinking. And her home was abusive her entire life. So she never had in her mind like a healthy example of parenting. So I asked her how she was doing, and we had taken her kids out and done some things with her kids. And I texted her and I just said, hey, your kids, I love your kids. You're doing a good job as a mom. And she said, thank you for saying that. She texted me back. She said, thanks for saying that. I fear every day that I'm going to ruin my kids. And I was thinking about that and just thinking, many parents feel that way. They're always afraid, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to ruin my kids. I'm not going to have the right answers for them when they ask me tough questions. But we don't need to fear. Think about all the times God tells us not to fear. We don't need to fear that we're ruining our kids, because if you're following in God's way and filling your heart and mind with God's information, God is working in your kid's life. It's not all on you. It's not the pressure's all on me to be the perfect parent. I am teaming up with God, and He's leading my kids. He's going to protect and guide my kids. So we don't need to be afraid that just because we don't know all the answers, we're going to ruin our kids. But just lean into God and His help, and ask the right people for help. And just remember that God uniquely equips you for your kids. And God made you for your kids, and He made your kids for you. And you're both going to be on a journey of learning how to do life together. But I just think of all the life lessons that our kids have taught us over the years, things we did not expect. And it's just such a gift that God gave us our kids. But also, we need to remember that God gave us to our kids. So that relationship is really important, really special. And God has equipped us to do that. And then James 1:5 says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly. And I just think it's important for us to remember there will be times that we lack wisdom. And it's not something to fear. It's just something to know the right person to go to, and that's God, because He has tons of wisdom that He is just ready to give us if we just turn to Him and ask for it.
So we have these barriers that stop us. Number one is that we forget life is brief. So what do? Well, invest. Be intentional every day. Invest time into parenting. Don't just let it pass us by. Number two, we fear that we don't know enough. So what do? Learn and develop. Like, just humble ourselves and develop. That leads to the third thought, and that is this: that we find another barrier is we find it hard to put down our pride. And Hannah just mentioned the lessons that we've learned from parenting, and I said this last night, and I'll say it again. Like, there's no way that we come here like, hey, we've got it all together. Like, we are perfect parents. Like, we are not. She says the lessons we've learned as parents, and my mind goes to so many times when I've had to swallow my pride and tell my kids, like, hey, I messed up. Like, I reacted, responded. I should not have said that. I was harsh toward you. Sometimes I hate this, but sometimes my kids, they're like, well, Dad, we're going to ask Mom, because you always say no. and I, and part of me is like, well, that's right, because I want guidelines. I want this. But the other day I had to tell my son, like, I said this last night, Micah is our youngest. He has my gift of sarcasm. But his gift of sarcasm, it can hit you low. Like, it can be that big, And the other day he said something. He was like, well, I'm not going to ask you. I was like, why aren't you going to ask me? He was like, because you are going to say no. And I just was like, well, why do you think that? He was like, Dad, you say no literally to everything I ask you. And I had to stop him, and I was like, okay, pause. Do I really say no to everything? It was like, no, you don't. And then he responded. He wasn't talking back. We try to have these discussions now. He was like, but can I ask you a question? I'm like, yeah. He goes, do you say no a lot? You know, and I was like, yes, I do. But, you know, the idea is sometimes I think as a parent, I know for me, no is a quick answer because I don't have to think about it and I don't have to process the situation. And if I really want you to go to that friend's house and do this, that's just pride. That's pride to just say, well, I'm not interested in your situation or your circumstances right now. And that's a barrier to helping parents because I don't just humble my own heart. And so when you think about putting down our pride, sometimes we as parents, we carry our pride in decisions and we carry our pride in apologies. We don't apologize to our kids. We need to. I know, Pastor Brian, you brought it up last night, the idea of your dad apologizing to you growing up. And that made a huge difference to me of my mom and dad apologizing. And even now, my mom is 76 years old and she works for me at the church about 12 hours a week. She's part-time staff. And man, we were talking about this yesterday. She's slightly, she's slightly losing her memory a little bit. Not a lot, but there'll be some things that I'm just like, oh, Mom, come on, you know. And the other day we had this moment on the phone and I was frustrated and I was like, Mom, stop it. Like, just stop. We'll deal with this later. And something that I was really encouraged by is like an hour later, we were meeting up for something and she just looked at me and she put her hand on my head and she said, I just want to tell you, I'm sorry for responding that way. And, you know, here I am at 42, my mom's 76, and she still apologized. Like, that says a lot to me. And you know what? I could learn from that. So when we talk about these barriers to parenting, this barrier of pride and finding it hard to put down our pride, the counter of that is to humble ourselves in parenting. And that even goes back to that thought of not knowing enough. Sometimes we don't humble ourselves just to ask questions. And so we need to understand and admit that in every relationship, we can't be in the image management mode. You know, a lot of times in relationships, we're like, well, I'm the dad, I'm the mom, I've got to keep that. We have to humble our heart and say, I need your help. And so the barrier of pride is a big one. The fourth barrier I think we focus on often is the fact that we focus on behavior modification or we focus on externals. And
Yeah. So in our house that we live in right now, right next to my side of the bed on the wall, when we bought the house, it was really old and decrepit. We got it for a steal of a deal. But when you get a house for a steal of a deal, there's more. And so we put 10 months of work into our house before we moved in. And just trying, almost every surface needed to be overhauled. It's just so much work. But when our bedroom, when we painted it, it was painted black, first of all, when we bought it. And then when we painted it, we realized that there was some weird glow-in-the-dark paint that somebody had put handprints all over the walls. And so when we did the first layer of white over the black, these colorful handprints showed up all over. And then so we had to do multiple coats of white paint over the walls to get it covered.
like a lot.
Lots of coats of paint. And so then once it was all covered, it looks good. Shortly after that, we moved all our stuff in, and I noticed when I was laying on my side of the bed looking straight at the wall, there's a piece of packing tape. It was about this big that was stuck to the wall that somehow we had missed in all of, in all the renovations we were doing, and it was underneath all those layers of paint that we had put on the wall. So then after the paint dried, it began to bubble, and you could see the shape of this piece of packing tape on the wall. It's still there. And I have not yet come to the place of peeling that off, because if I do, I'm going to have to deal with a big hole in all these loose paint. But it drives me absolutely nuts when I'm laying in bed and I'm looking at this bubbly spot on the wall. And if I take my foot or my hand and I just reach over there and I press it against the wall, it'll disappear for a minute and it goes flat against the wall. And you can't even tell it's there, which must be why we missed it, is because, when you roll over it, it just disappears. So it easily, like you can press it and easily it goes away and you can't see it. But, give it a few minutes and it's going to bubble back up and the problem is still there. And I think a lot of times when we're raising our families, if we focus on looking good and if we are always like, oh, my family would still look good. It's funny because being parents of older teens, when we're around our friends at church, like tons of families at our church have little kids. And I feel like they're always apologizing to us for the behavior of their little kids. Oh, I'm so sorry my kids are crazy. Sorry my kids are rowdy. And I'm like, they haven't seen us when our kids were little. They were hellions. They were crazy. They were loud. They ran. They screamed. Our oldest, and he briefly mentioned last night, our oldest Dennis, he was a really tough baby. He cried and screamed. He had a lot of stomach issues, screamed in pain for his whole first year of life. And I was that parent apologizing everywhere when I'm like, so sorry. But, the thing is as we raise them, if we focus on just looking good, if that's what we're thinking about all the time, that's going to send a loud message to our kids. If looking good is the important thing, many times like that piece of tape on our wall, things might look good, but under the surface, it's not good. And how many families have you seen raise their kids that way? It's all about the outward. It's all about the looks. We look perfect. But then something blows up and you find out, oh, there's been all these underlying problems that were not addressed because the goal through all of our life was to look good. And it's just really got, man looks on the outward appearance, but what does God look on? The heart. God cares about what's in the heart. So we should care most about that. We should focus on heart change. When there's issues with our kids, which there will be, there's going to be challenges and things we have to stop, focus on. But immediately our focus should not be, let's change how this looks to everybody else. It should be, let's change what's in our heart so that we can be pleasing to God.
Yeah, and those externals sometimes when they become the driving force, oftentimes we neglect the heart. And another reason that we neglect the heart, and I think that just a barrier in this idea of healthy parenting, is the fact that we, to be honest, we get tired and we become lazy. Just in parenting, like we do. We sometimes life comes after a long day. For me, after a long day, I want to come home and just collapse and turn on some TV show that we're watching and just be absent, But the fact is, what Hannah said at the very beginning, we're never going to get this time back. We never will get the time back of our family and the days we have now. So I can't just come home and turn the off switch and just veg. There are times for that, I think. And we have tried to, in our family, and the kids know it, we try to set aside times when, Monday is my day off. So usually Monday morning, they all know I'm going golfing. I stink at golf, but I just like to get out there and do that. And then I know that a lot of times during the week, we own an art gallery at a coffee shop. So she's really busy. So sometimes on a Monday afternoon, she'll go out after I get home. And then the kids know Monday night. That's when time together. So there's time for vegging. There's time just to turn it off. But in life, sometimes as a parent, it's just laziness. And the fact is that, I don't know if you're like this, but sometimes I'm not up for playing. Sometimes I'm not up for the late night as our kids got older, not up for the late night discussion or now we have, our daughter is almost 18 and so she comes in. I feel like it's every night right before bed. And she's been this way her whole life, but every night right before bed, she comes in with this deep question. And I'm like, Lena, not right now. I'm literally laying in bed. And she's like, but Dad, I have to. And I'm like, no, you don't. We don't need, but the truth is that sometimes I need to stop and just put aside my laziness and invest the energy and turn the TV off and put the phone down. And I think social media and all of that is great, but unfortunately, a lot of us allow that to run our schedule and to run our life. I would encourage you to, when you think about where's your energy, the old statement is, show me your checking account and I'll show you what's important to you. I think we could say, show your screen time and you'll show what's important to you. So it's good to utilize those apps, things like that, because otherwise we just become lazy. We become a byproduct of the culture that is around us rather than a byproduct of the God who's in us. And so as a Christian, I must always work on the idea of investing in energy. Number 6 on the handout is this thought that this next barrier. We falsely believe that by providing the right atmosphere, we will make up for our failures. As a pastor, I've seen this a ton. Good atmospheres and good environments like church or a Christian school or a youth group or Sunday school or a healthy nursery or good kids classes, all of those things are good, but and they are biblical help, but they are secondary to the home. Sometimes I've had parents say to me when I was a youth pastor, which was 16 years ago. I had parents then, and I still have parents now, say, "You're supposed to fix my kid." And as a youth pastor, "You're supposed to fix my kid. Like, you need to fix what I've messed up at home." And I remember there's one guy in our church now that whenever he had a problem, and his kids are older, but whenever he had a problem, he would call me and be like, "Pastor, you need to fix this," And I understand his idea is like, you need to reinforce and help me with this. But there came a point where I just called him by name. We'll call him Fred, I said, "Fred, like, I don't need to fix this. Like, you need to invest the time in your family." And sometimes what we do is we think that, well, my kids are in church. They should turn out okay. I've been asked, I can think of one family right now that the mom asked me a couple of years ago. She was like, "I just don't get it. We tried to have our kids in church every week, but why did they turn out this way?" And in the back of my mind, I don't want to tell her the answer, because the answer is, well, you didn't invest at home. So you have to invest at home. And I think that a lot of us, we have to remember that the greatest place of influence is the home. You think about how many hours are in a week, 168 hours a week. And we invest, if we're at every church event every week, then what, 3 hours a week, maybe 4 hours a week at the most that we're spending at church. So we have the kids for 164 more hours. And yet we put the onus on the church or a school or a teacher when it's like, no, we have our kids. So don't allow that barrier of thinking a good atmosphere is going to make up for the failures that we have at home. Instead, kind of going back to the beginning of this lesson, build God into the DNA of the family. Like, everything we do, again, through the day is we're going to talk about the Lord. We're going to talk about the things of God. And Hannah's family has been instrumental in helping us parent, because of how they, and my parents are too, but specifically in this thought, her parents all growing up would talk about everything in their family. So as teens and as kids, like her mom still does it. They were at our house last week, and I walk in and I hear her mom ask this this huge question that she was like, "Well, Hannah, let me ask you this." She asked a life question, and they grew up with that. And so, like, what did they do? They built God into the DNA of like, well, let me ask you, what do you think God would say to someone who is doing X, Y, and Z? Or so you think about your kids coming home from school and they're like, "Mom, today Sally told the teacher, this story and lied about me." Then you're able to say, well, let's talk about that. What would God say about that situation? What am I doing? I'm just working on building God into the DNA and building God into my answers. So thinking about the right atmosphere, making up for our failures, can be a barrier. Barrier number 7.
Number 7 is forgetting the power of our example. And just want to briefly hit on this because we've kind of covered it, but just that our children will do what we do and they will mimic our example. And so just don't forget how powerful that is. And I don't want to be something that I don't want my kids to be. I don't want to tell them one thing, but then I'm something completely opposite. So just making sure that everything that I put my focus and energy into is something that I would want kids to do as well. If they see me loving Jesus with all my heart, they're going to love Jesus with all their heart. They're going to want to know him. And too many times we're focused so much on authority that we forget that our example speaks so much louder than just our position as boss to our kids. And that becomes more and more powerful. Your example becomes more powerful as your kids get older because your relationship kind of shifts from that authoritarian place to when they're older, they need to respect you as a person. And if they respect your example, they're going to listen to your example a lot more than just your words. So, I think it's so cool watching my kids become leaders in their generation and watching them just have influence of their very own. And I think that, just being that example to them rather than just an authority, it's kind of, you have to let go. You have to release that authority as they get older, but it's really fun to see. But remembering that everything that I do, even in that transition, is going to impact them and in their leadership, how they become leaders, because it'll just be a few years before that's their position is some sort of authority over somebody else. So just realizing you're always watching everything, every single day. They're watching what's really important to me. And then number 8, is that yours?
Sure. Number 8, we forget our power source. Yeah. I spoke about this last night, but if you missed it, you can get the session from Brian. But just the fact that we think we can't handle parenting and our family, and I think every parent has that moment often where you're like, God, like, what am I doing? Like, what's going on? I'm so overwhelmed. But the fact is, like, we really do have help from the Lord through his word, through godly people around us, through relationships, by even looking at people who have invested in us or bad examples of people investing in us. And okay, I'm not going to do it that way. Like, God uses all of that to help strengthen us to parent. But we can't forget that God and his word is our greatest source. I think living in our culture, we look over that a lot. And we need to remember that every single day, I need to seek the Lord and seek his help. Ephesians 6:4 says, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And the idea with that is every single day I am saying, God, I need you. And I want your help in leading my family today. So when you look at this idea of biblical goals for parenting, so to help my children have a heart for God, and to set a biblical framework. That's the goal. Those are the 2 main goals, I think, that we can find from Deuteronomy that are in parenting. But there's a lot of barriers. So the challenge I would give you is maybe look at your life, look at your investing, and what are the barriers that are stopping you from accomplishing the goal? What's the barrier that's stopping you from making God first place in your family? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's energy. Maybe what is it? And then step back and don't say, all right, I've got to tackle all 8 of these barriers. I think I got to do it. Maybe we just focus on one this week. Like, all right, this week, I'm not going to focus on behavior modification or externals. This week, I'm going to be intentional in directing the heart towards Jesus. Next week, I'm not going to be proud the whole week. No, I'm going to focus on humility through the week. And as we build these things, it's going to keep refreshing. But the truth is, we have to understand that God has equipped us, and healthy parenting is possible. And those goals are accomplished. But it comes back to me not allowing the barriers to restrict.